So, have you ever experienced a time when someone criticizes you or makes an assumption about you or even tries to give you some constructive feedback on something they would like to see happen differently, and you get really defensive and all of those alarm bells in your body go off? Well, this is really an indication of a few things, but mostly that you may not be comfortable or willing to accept influence. And so, depending on the person who's giving you this feedback, it could mean that even in your closest relationships, you're not willing to accept influence. And there's some subconscious reasons for that. And there's some very strategic steps you can take to change this dynamic, because it's one of the most important dynamics to creating a connection that is secure and can really last the test of time. So if you're new here, I'm Ketra Thompson, and I'm a certified master hypnotist and a life recovery coach. So what I do is I help my clients go back on a subconscious level to the belief systems that are driving their unwanted behaviors and feelings, so they can reframe those subconsciously, allowing them to have a new operating system moving forward. So if you'd like to learn more about that, check out the link in the description below. My website gives you lots of information, but also you can set up a completely free complimentary consultation call while you're there so that we can chat and I can figure out what you're dealing with and we can get to the heart of what's going on with you. And at the very least, you'll walk away with a lot more clarity, but it'll give me an opportunity to see if we're a good fit to work together and to make my best recommendations. So you'll want to check that out. And I also really appreciate it when you can click like and subscribe. It helps you to know every time I put out a new video and keeps you in the loop of everything that I'm doing and all of the teachings that come out. So let's talk a little bit about what this looks like. So in an intimate relationship, it's often that is the person that triggers us the most. And we can get more defensive with that person because they're really holding up a mirror to us. And they're creating something for us to see that we might not have seen before in ourselves. But if you are not willing to accept influence, that can be a big problem. It means you're lacking a sense of curiosity and openness and really a groundedness in yourself that says, I'm safe enough to accept this influence and consider what it might mean. It doesn't mean you automatically agree with the other person, but it means that you believe you're safe enough to at least consider what's being presented to you. So there's actually a few reasons why we might not accept influence. So one really good example I want to give you is when it comes to, let's say, politics. If you are surrounding yourself with basically an echo chamber of everything you listen to, every news outlet, every friend that you have, community group you're in, is giving you the same message and they're just echoing each other back and forth, then you're not going to probably be very open to an outside perspective because you've closed yourself off from the curiosity of being open to that. So this can happen a lot in religious circles as well. A lot of the same ideals and viewpoints get reintroduced to someone over and over and over and over, and they don't always actively look to listen or get information from outside of those sources because they sort of assume that what they're getting is accurate. And you see these huge transformations in people, and it happened with me too, once they decide to step outside of the echo chamber, outside of the bubble of information, and get information from multiple sources. Not just the opposite of what they've been listening to, but lots of different perspectives, different genders' perspectives, different experiences, even perspectives from other places in the world that they wouldn't typically have represented where they live. All of that's really important to open up your mind and allow you to entertain the idea of seeing something differently. Now, in an intimate relationship, a lot of the things that trigger these defensive feelings are actually subconscious. They're programming that went into your mind when you were very, very young and is sort of locked into your subconscious mind now. So when we're young, that programming gets in and then it gets protected and locked down. So it's the meaning we assigned it. So if we had neglectful parents, if we had critical parents, if we had parents that were withheld affection or withheld praise unless we were doing exactly what they wanted, or any kind of dysfunction. And let's be honest, like as humans, we all have some dysfunction from our parents. We're all raised by imperfect humans because there is no such thing as a perfect human. But there's different levels of that. So our belief system gets created, and when there's a wound around it, that wound becomes a trigger. So if there's a wound around being criticized and being told that we're not enough in some way, or even interpreting that we aren't enough to get our parents' approval, or that we made mistakes in the past that no one gave us grace for, no one allowed us to be human and just allowed those mistakes. Now when mistakes are pointed out as an adult, we can oftentimes feel the pain of the old wound coming up. And that old wound is opened back up, and all that pain comes flooding out, and you assume that it's because of the person speaking to you. But in reality, it's an old wound from the past. And so it's very important to learn how to decipher that so that you can step into a place that's really connected to your self-worth and is able to hold space and curiosity for what someone has to say to you without making an assumption. So when this is a repeat pattern in your life, it really is indicating that you are trying to hang on to a level of control. You're trying to control how others perceive you, how others feel, and whenever we're trying to control things outside of ourselves, it's a big problem. We cannot control things outside of ourselves, and we're creating a story around what we think these other people think and feel about us, and then internalizing it toward ourselves, thinking if they think and feel that way, everyone's going to, and it becomes this defense mechanism. So we want to be able to let go of the control. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this, and I'm going to give you some practical steps to take today. First of all, I want to mention the most rapid way for you to do this is for you to do the subconscious work. Because through hypnotherapy, you can go back and reframe those old beliefs that created this pain, this belief system around the pain, and the behaviors that are being driven by it, so that you actually have a new operating system. And I help my clients do that every day, and it's incredible to watch. But there are some steps that you can take right now to start shifting this for yourself. So one thing you want to do is, as soon as you sense that tensed up feeling in yourself, you want to be able to call a time out from that conversation. You want to excuse yourself, take a break, and you do not want to just disappear and never come back to talk about that, because that leaves the other person feeling really abandoned. So you always want to say, I'm going to check back in with you in an hour. I really need some time right now to process. And so that lets them know I'm not abandoning you, but I'm going to take this time to be self-reflective. So while you're being self-reflective, you want to be curious about when you first felt that kind of pain and where that might have come from. That's going to give you some insight into whether this is really valid in this situation or if it's old pain. And if you're going away thinking about all the ways that you can have a rebuttal to what they said and all the ways you can prove them wrong and show them how terrible they are, then you really aren't being self-reflective about you. And this time is about doing that for yourself. And the third thing you want to ask is my behavior and reaction to them actually creating distance or closeness? Is it pushing them farther away, or is it allowing me to pull them in closer or me to move toward them? And that is going to really help you answer this last part, which is determining whether or not you're being curious. So being curious is asking questions. It's not sitting there arguing back and trying to make your case, which we've all done. I've certainly done it. But when we're trying to make our case, we're actually trying to make sure we win and they lose. And in the relationship that is intimate in your life, your closest relationships, but not to mention even other ones, even work relationships, this is just going to do the opposite. This is not going to get you the effect that you're desiring. So when you can be curious, it means you're asking questions. What makes you think that? How did you experience that? How do you think that I could show up differently for you? You brainstorm together. You're mutually trying to be understanding so that in the end you get a win-win. And this is much easier said than done, because the reality is that we need to address those underlying triggers first before we can move into really authentic, curious communication. And this is part of the reason why when I do work with couples, I work with them separately, doing custom hypnotherapy separately before we come together for couples coaching, because we really need to work on the core wounds. We need to work on the triggers and get each person really centered in themselves and their self-worth so that they can work like a team, so they can come together, and so they can actually have effective communication. So I hope that was helpful in giving you a little bit more clarity about what it means when we can't accept influence and how to take some strategic steps to stop that, calling that time out, being self-reflective about the past, asking ourselves, are we creating distance or closeness, and then determining whether or not we're actually being curious like we need to be. So if you'd like to learn more, again, check out that link in the description below. You can set up that consultation call. And until next time, I hope you're curating a life by your own design.